Welcome to the Dog Expert Podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. Powered by canineprinciples.com, helping passionate dog people go from feeling unsure and overwhelmed to confident, compassionate and science savvy through a rich library of online courses and formal qualifications. Each week on the podcast, we dive deep into the real, raw and rewarding world of dogs. This isn't about obedience. This is about understanding. Because dogs aren't problems to solve. They're free-thinking, sentient beings to connect with.
Hey!
Hello!
Welcome to the Dog Expert Podcast with me, Jo Middleton, and
Emily Dustin. Hello, everyone. It's so good to be back.
Yeah, so good to have you back, Em. So good to have you back. Have you been having a massive heat wave?
No, it's been cold and rainy.
Really? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we are like melting here.
A little bit jealous.
Melting. Yeah, really, really warm, which is awesome. You know, we sort of pay good money to go on holiday somewhere warm, and then when it happens here, it's like everyone complains about it.
Oh my goodness. No. I'm used to nice, hot South African weather, dry heat. The sun is quite nice.
I love it, but I still see so many people taking their dogs out, and saw someone with a black cocker spaniel going for a run in the middle of the day, and it's like nearly 30 degrees. It's just bonkers. But that said, the mornings and the evenings have been lovely and cool, and the dogs have really enjoyed it. Yeah. We've got someone super special joining us tonight. You excited?
I'm very excited.
Is it your favorite week?
It's always my favorite week. No, I just love the geek part, the neurobiology, everything is just right up my alley. So
Really
I'm so excited to talk to him and meet him.
Should we tell everyone who it is?
Let's do it.
We have got the one and only Daniel Shaw from ABK joining us this evening. Daniel is backstage. Daniel is a legend. If you aren't familiar with Daniel, I'm going to bring him on and he can tell you all about himself because, I'm just so excited. Daniel, welcome.
Welcome. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Exciting to be here.
We are so happy that you're with us this evening. And I know we're going to talk about canine resilience and the science behind it. But I feel like maybe we could still be here at midnight because there are so many rabbit holes we could go
100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? When you've got three people in a room that all love talking about dogs and dog behaviour, it's just the cutting it off is an issue.
Oh, it really is. It really is. And every episode, Emily and I are just buzzing, aren't we? Because
so much. It's like the best day. Because even when the show ends, and then you guys are heading off, going to bed. I'm awake and close the laptop off. I go get the kids ready, and and they're like, "Mom, how was your podcast?" I was like, "Oh, it was so good. We spoke about this and this and this. It was amazing."
So if you have been living in a cave and you're not familiar with who Daniel is and what he does, Daniel, do you want to tell people a little bit more about how you got started in the doggy world and what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a dog behaviourist and trainer. I also work with cats actually as well, based in the southeast of England. And I tend to generally support behaviour cases. So generally cases like what I consider sort of more along the lines of aggression, separation, anxiety cases where maybe dogs are struggling, or cats, to find kind of I suppose in terms of their emotional well-being or their caregivers' emotional well-being in the home. So that's kind of usually what I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis with my business, Animal Behaviour Kent. Which is, for those that, like yourself, Emily, in other countries, county in the southeast of England. Sort of my background in terms of getting into this, I've got a master's in neuroscience and my original degree was in psychology. So I've always had an interest in sort of looking at the science of behavior and the biology of behavior more broadly, and looking at how we can apply this to our dogs in terms of understanding our dogs' behavior, and also in terms of improving their welfare and emotional well-being on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's the amazing thing when you're sort of looking at the neurobiology aspect, because you can bring in things like looking at actually how does a dog's sleep patterns, how does a dog's exploration patterns and exercise patterns influence things like their emotional well-being. So there's all these things that you can start to bring in when you're looking at it from that neurobiology angle. And also looking at the way dogs perceive their environment as well. And actually there's so much of our perception is influenced by our past experience, by our own brain. We're not seeing any kind of true reality, us as humans. Our dogs are certainly not either. No animal seeing a true reality. We're seeing our own kind of constructed snapshot of reality, and that constructed snapshot is influenced by our brain, by the processing capacity of our brain, by our brain's learning experience about the world. So sort of actually trying to dive into that and understand that, I think, can be so valuable in terms of actually helping our dogs cope better and thrive better in the world that they're living in.
Oh,
so yeah, that answers your question.
Oh, it's just chicken
so
soup
good.
with soul. That emotional safety is just so key, and I feel like it's something that I talk about an awful lot, and providing a dog with the opportunity to have choice, and there's just so many things there that we could unpick. Emily, I know you're chomping at the bit.
I think there's so many amazing points that you brought out with that as well, because it's not even just the neurobiology and natural behaviors, foraging, seeking, all these things that dogs do. One of the things that I love that you brought up as well is the emotional, the well-being of the owners as well. Yeah. Because we as behaviorists understand all of this, the chemical communications, hormone fluctuations. We understand what's going on with the dog and from the dog's perspective. And when we come into a home and we're helping feline, canine, whatever behavior that we're working with, the biggest part is, in order for that dog's emotional well-being and welfare to improve, is that their caregiver has to have that knowledge in a way that they understand. And it's that coin drop so often, as you mentioned, because we see it from our perspective, from our own reality. And also we're completely separate species, and we only know what we know and communicate in the way that we communicate. And when you have that bridge and you help them with that species communication bridge, and they understand from the dog's perspective, and they go, oh, right, my dog isn't actually aggressive with the part of intent. It's more fear reactivity. The dog is displaying behaviors because they're scared, and it's, an offense behavior because they're going, oh no, don't come near me, wah, 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 wah. Then once the owner goes, caregiver will turn around and go, oh, that makes sense. My dog is scared. And that changes everything. So it's not even just the dog's emotional well-being, as well as the family who have that dog, because once everyone's needs are met and there's understanding, it improves the quality of life for everybody involved.
Absolutely. And the dog picks up on the caregiver's emotions, and that can just create a whole snowball effect of a situation where the guardian's feeling super anxious, and then the dog, everything sort of snowballs. So if we just strip it back a little bit and talk about what resilience actually is, and make sure that everyone listening is clear, how would you describe resilience in really layman's terms to one of my children, Daniel?
So resilience is, I think, a topic for sure that kind of relates to some of what we're talking about, both in terms of helping the caregiver and helping the dog in terms of being able to manage the pressures and the potential stressors in day-to-day life. And when we think about resilience, I think what we're talking about is that ability to adapt and bounce back from a potential stressor. So if I was talking to your kids, I don't know, maybe not being able to get something from the shop, you go to the shop, their favorite snacks are not there, and actually being able to bounce back from that stress and not the whole day being ruined. If we're talking about a dog, maybe we're talking about, seeing another dog in the park that looks at them a little bit funny, someone barks at them, someone approaches them a little bit too quickly. Some of those stresses that we can't necessarily control on a day-to-day basis for our dogs, as much as we would like to obviously be able to protect our dogs that might not want someone to approach them and touch them, or they might not want another dog to bark at them. Most dogs don't want another dog just sort of having a go at them when they're out on their walks, right? But unfortunately, we can't necessarily protect our dogs from all these experiences. So that's where resilience is a really important part of that picture. And I think, we can differentiate it from perhaps, something more along the lines of robustness, in the sense of, is a dog being stressed by this, or is this sort of washing over a dog? So if you might talk about sort of a robust dog that, the other dog barks at them, doesn't really cause them any stress, doesn't really cause them any concern at all. We might talk about a resilient dog who actually does experience some stress from that, but is able to bounce back from that stress very effectively. And there's a slightly different things to kind of look at. But I think really important to make that differentiation, especially when we think about the situations we put our dogs into. Because I think one thing that we also need to acknowledge when we're talking about resilience is that doesn't, just because you've got a resilient dog, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should put them in all these situations that we know they can cope with, because that might not be good still from their well-being point of view, from their quality of life. They might be able to cope with going into a busy environment, being petted by hundreds of people, whatever situation it might be, going into kind of a dog sports environment that's very, very high intensity. But actually we might still look at that dog and sort of look at that dog's behavior and recognize that actually this, even though it's something they are resilient enough to cope with and bounce back from potentially the stresses that this might put our dog under, it doesn't necessarily mean it's something they enjoy. So I think that's the other kind of piece of the picture with the resilience. Actually, when we're talking about situations our dog is resilient to, we've also got to ask, actually, do they enjoy this situation as well? Do they enjoy this sport? Do they enjoy being put in this situation where they're being petted by lots of different people? Do they enjoy, whatever situation we might be talking about as well?
I love that you say that, because that's so important. Because it is, they'll go, my dog loves going to dog sports. They really love it, and they are resilient, and they have good recovery rates. But then the dog is actually quite also overwhelmed. These, really intense environments. And then, as you mentioned earlier, the perspective of the individual. Does the dog actually enjoy it, or does the guardian love it so much that they're projecting that the dog enjoys it?
Absolutely. And it's the same it's the same kind of systems that govern stress, fear and recovery that are all at play, isn't it? So the same as with us humans. And resilience is shaped by so many different factors, and many, because dogs can't tell us what they're feeling, many we might not even know why they feel that they have to behave in a certain way, or that they do act in a certain way. Like, for example, if a dog is got, like a greyhound has got high prey drive, and they feel that they have to hyper focus on something, and then they walk down the street, and then a cat runs across, and then there's like something going on over there, and then there's something going on over there, but we're able to redirect their attention and refocus them onto something else, versus a dog that doesn't distract from that and is completely laser focused in on that. That's quite an obvious example of how a dog can recover and be resilient versus one that can't. But then if you have a dog that maybe is more stoic, it might just be an increase in breath rate, or a change in ear position, or something that is the visible obvious or not as obvious sign that there's something that the dog is finding stressful, or something that they're unable to cope with as well as maybe another dog would. When you can we talk a bit about the concept of optimism in dogs?
Yeah.
Optimism, pessimism.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting kind of field of study. I mean, I suppose if we define optimism and pessimism a little bit first, I suppose it's that bias towards, in novel situations or where there's not enough information for an animal to fully judge what the outcome of a particular situation is going to be, whether they're more likely to believe that situation to be associated with positive outcomes or negative outcomes. And depending on the environment you're in, being more optimistic or being more pessimistic can both be helpful. If you're in an environment where, you know, there's lots of good things that might come up as a result of being optimistic, maybe you know, living near kind of human settlements, and humans are pretty friendly to dogs in those settlements. I suppose I'm thinking here particularly of kind of early dogs down the kind of evolutionary ladder as dogs start to domesticate, actually probably being a bit more optimistic. If you've got quite a dog friendly area, probably quite a good thing, because that might mean you get a little bit closer to the humans, you're more likely to engage with them, get some food, get some good snacks, get some, maybe even a good sleeping space. Whereas if you're a dog living in perhaps the opposite situation, where you've got that you know, maybe those negative outcomes that might be humans that aren't super friendly to dogs, that will chase them off, try and poison them. Again, being more pessimistic then is maybe going to be a little bit more helpful. And within that, there's been a lot of research on what sort of, firstly, kind of how we can identify optimistic / pessimistic biases in our dogs, and what might improve that optimistic bias. And one piece that really comes to mind for me when we talk about optimism in dogs is, and I think I can't actually remember the first author's name, but it was associated with Alexandra Horowitz, who's a canine cognition researcher in the US and has written a ton of books. So if anyone wants to kind of look up her work, she's got a ton of brilliant books out there as well that you can check out. And she looked at, in the study, they looked at nose work in dogs, and actually providing dogs with sort of nose work opportunities. And they found that providing these nose work opportunities, and they sort of had these sort of, I think they used like boxes where the dogs would dig around, and there'd be treats in the boxes, and they provide several boxes on a regular basis. And I think they compared it to something else, like, I can't remember what the comparative they used was. It was a long time since I've actually looked at the study, but something else that sort of wasn't the same as nose work. It might even have been something like more of a traditional training or something like that, but I would say double check the study because I'm not 100% sure. But what they found is actually the nose work activities increased optimism in dogs. So really, really cool to know actually some of the enrichment stuff we're doing, some of the training that's really readily available now with dogs actually can start increasing that optimistic bias with dogs, which, you know, especially when we're talking about some dogs and dogs that might have had those more difficult histories, dogs that might have had past experiences that maybe push them towards a more pessimistic bias, or it might, you know, just be their breeding history and the genetic hand they've been dealt for whatever reason that biases them to be a little bit more on the pessimistic side. We can actually support them with that, and we can support them with becoming a little bit more optimistic, because generally, not always necessarily, but I'd say generally in the human world, being a little bit more optimistic in the environments our dogs are living in is probably going to be a good thing and probably going to be supportive for our companion dogs.
Oh, 100%. It's so true, because that optimism as well, especially when you're working with enrichment, seeking, finding, problem solving, that really does build the confidence and that optimism, because good outcomes, whenever the dog engages or does something, especially if they're fearful, a little bit nervous, every time the dog successfully problem solves or seeks and finds and retrieves something that's good, that increases that positive experience and association. And that, again, like you mentioned, will just build that optimism, because good things happen. It helps with their whole demeanor as well. So that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and I think like
Absolutely.
processing novelty as well, because we so often present novel things to our dogs, whether that be meeting new people, whether that be a change in our home environment, meeting new dogs in the home as well. All sorts of weird things that go on, even down to things like building works in our home, when we're doing all these weird human things that our dogs just are going to really struggle to make sense of, actually going into that with a bit of a positive outlook. And from our point of view, obviously, if we can, being able to reinforce that positive outlook as well, so we can make sure when they do meet those builders that come into the home, we perhaps set up some good experiences to start off with. When some of those weird loud things are happening, fireworks or whatever, for the first time, we've done some work before that to set that up to be a good experience, rather than it being something that the dog learns is negative, and then we have to start looking at trying to
Encounter conditions.
rewrite some of those pathways.
Yeah. And it's like running, right? It's like running a marathon. You don't just go and run a marathon. You prep, you learn about your pace, your running, your speed, all of that. And then when you run the marathon for the first time, you're way more ready and prepared. And going to builders, which actually it's such a common issue, when builders and even next door neighbors who are building, and then the dog next door is suffering, especially if they're quite sensitive and nervous. And we're talking about emotional resilience and the recovery rate, and more sensitive dogs will take longer to recover because of the cortisol levels and the stress and everything else that's going on with them. And, advice was prevention is better than cure. It's that helping them along that path. So when the situation happens, they are ready, and that will increase their emotional resilience and their recovery rate, as if you had not prepared prior.
And I think if we can know our baseline normals for our dogs, so we know what their normal body language is like, their normal posture, their normal signs of slight anxiety when they're starting to feel some pressures, then we're able to pick up on when things are getting a bit too much and make the choice to remove them from a situation. Because what we can see sometimes is a dog that seems calm might actually be shut down. They might have learned that the world isn't a safe place for them, and that expressing that learned helplessness state, that expressing any sort of emotions is going to be ignored anyway, and they're not going to get an outcome. Their feelings aren't valid. So dogs that have got more self-confidence, and they've been they've got more resilience built up because they've had more positive experiences, and they've learned that the world isn't as scary. What we don't want to do is miss any signs of unmet needs, really, or sort of really chronic stresses that a dog is experiencing, because it appears to be well behaved from a human perspective, because from the dog's point of view it might just be suppressed and in that state of calm. It's shut down, it's not calm. See it a lot with the ex-breeding bitches when they first come in for the first few weeks when we foster them, and they'll curl up and just pretend to be asleep, and everyone says, oh, they're so well behaved, they'll make someone a wonderful pet, and they're so good. And that dog is really messed up and institutionalized and just so traumatized. But because from a human perspective they're quiet and they're asleep, they're being well behaved. But the resilience that dog's built up is actually, there's no point in trying, because no one's going to listen anyway. No one understands. So I'm really excited to talk about something that Daniel's got coming up literally next week. So excited. But I just want to talk a little bit about practical ways that we can build resilience just if anyone who is watching has thought, actually, yeah, maybe that my dog is shut down or isn't quite as resilient as I thought they were. What top tips would you give to someone, Daniel?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing I'll just follow up on what you said, in that I think trauma and stress and, you know, some of these past experiences can affect the nervous system in very different ways. And, you know, whether that be a dog that is really, really struggling to regulate their arousal and really struggling to actually bring down some of their stress axes, or whether that's a dog that actually might be kind of stressed but in almost some sort of immobilized state.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes that can look very different. And the effect on a dog's physiology in terms of kind of, you know, what we might be seeing if we were looking at some of those physiological variables in that dog's brain and body might be very different. But they, you know, there's still, you know, we still obviously need to think about what we can do to help that dog be able to cope better on a day-to-day basis. So I think the first thing I would say there is an individualized approach is always going to be key. And being able to understand that dog's body language and to be able to understand what improvement looks like for your individual dog is going to be key. And there, I would say there are some broad pointers that we can look for, especially when we talk about kind of the core behavioral needs of dogs that are likely to be really helpful. But when we're applying those, we need to apply those in such a way that it is not, you know, re-traumatizing for an individual dog. If we have got a dog that's experienced psychological trauma, and we don't always know what that is, so that can be difficult, and that's where that understanding of body language and being able to read an individual dog's signals is really, really helpful. So I think, you know, kind of thinking about core needs, I'd say hopefully everyone's got the idea that they need to be thinking about obviously feeding, making sure the dog is fed and hydrated. We can talk about how we can do that in specific ways that might help the dog as well in a little bit. But I think a really important place to start is social needs as well. Yeah. And thinking about how we can build social relationships in a way that's going to be helpful for that dog. Because for a lot of dogs that have had difficult experiences, it's not going to be someone being all over them, someone being really, really touchy, someone being super tactile, someone giving them a load of attention. Actually, a lot of dogs that I work with that have had difficult past experiences do not like that at all. And actually being almost sort of finding a way to spend time with the dogs, finding a way to share a space with the dog where you're not giving them a lot of attention can sometimes be really, really helpful. And actually, you know, giving them that opportunity when they feel comfortable to be able to come to you can then be really valuable. You know, I had one case a few years ago where the dog was adopted from a rescue in, I think, some sort of other country. I can't remember. I don't think it was Romania, as there's a lot of Romanian rescue dogs in the UK now. I don't think it was from Romania. I can't remember where the dog was imported from, but the dog was so shut down, so fearful. This dog hid in the top floor of these people's houses, and you could visibly see her panicking as soon as someone entered the room. You could see her starting to hyperventilate. So we realized, you know, actually, to start off with, no one can really be in this room. You know, we can drop off food, drop off supplies, but we're not really going to spend a lot of time in that room. And what we're just going to do is just present some smells on a regular basis. So, you know, social interaction can really, really vary from actually just presenting something that smells of you, so we can get the dog used to your particular odor, to obviously being very hands-on, being very touchy. Of course, some dogs absolutely love that and are going to be a big fan of you doing that. But we know that social interaction, in whatever form that it is useful for your individual dog, is really valuable. It provides this social buffering effect. It helps dogs regulate their stress axes and recover from those day-to-day stressors. So social interaction is really valuable. And alongside that, we need to also think about what sort of and who and which individuals we are setting up our dogs to interact with as well.
Yes.
Because what we also don't want is, you know, when we're thinking of humans, we can modify our behaviors a little bit more. We can do some of those things that I just spoke about. But actually, a lot of dogs need that opportunity to interact with a member of their own species as well. So I think that's the other thing we need to bring in. But when we're bringing in other dogs, when we're setting up social opportunities for our dog with other dogs, we also need to think about what sort of dog is going to be appropriate for that, because we know if we've got a dog that actually has difficulties in their own social history, then that might mean, or is likely to mean, in fact, that some of the way they perceive social cues in the environment, some of the way they interact socially, is hampered in such a way that they may not be the best candidate to interact with another dog that is socially sort of hampered or kind of limited by that lack of experience. So again, if we're talking about a socially inexperienced dog, a dog that's not had a history of, or socially experienced in a negative way, hasn't got a good history of social interactions for whatever reason, actually we need to think really carefully about the candidate that we're setting up that dog with for social interactions. And thirdly, of course, if we are bringing in another dog for social interactions, we need to make sure those social interactions aren't something that's going to have a negative effect on your helper dog's mental well-being as well.
Oh,
yes,
absolutely. There's so many times that you see on reels and social media where they will use a dog to socialize another dog, and that both dogs are in a state of overwhelm. And it's usually because it looks really impressive when it's a reactive dog, right? The dog who's struggling is the reactive dog. And that dog's now freaking out because it's seeing the other dog, and it's complete flooding. It's no appropriate exposure, gradual or systematic. It's just flooding right here. And you see these short clips, and then people are also set up to fail because it looks really impressive that this dog is reacting. And then you see the other dog, and all that body language is showing appeasement gestures, avoidance, trying to diffuse, and that poor dog is in a position to also fail. And they usually go, oh, just get an older dog to teach the younger puppy some manners or some tolerance, even if it's not reactivity. And then the older dog is put in a position where they've got this little, and they might not technically, might have a puppy license. And for those who, it's a common used word, for those who are watching, a puppy license is a period of time where dogs are just happen to be a bit more tolerant of puppies until they develop a bit older. But in the sense of both dogs interacting, that one dog is put under unrealistic expectations to teach the other dog something that the person wants them to learn. And then it's a recipe for disaster. And one of the common things is, as you were mentioning, Daniel, was that someone is trying to do this work, or you're doing this work with your dog, and it's also understanding that dog's perspective of what their social interactions are, what their social needs are, what their stresses are. And then it's also helping somebody understand that, especially if you've got no history and it is a rescue dog, they just want a little dog to sit on their lap so they can love them and tickle them and give them, and it breaks their world, and it shatters their glass, because that picket fence dream of having this dog that you love and cuddle and it's a companion and everything's wonderful is now shattered, where they go, what do you mean I mustn't touch my dog? And it's most dogs like to be touched, but this particular dog is a bit sensitive in that social aspect. And again, going back to what Daniel said, is finding that social need for that individual dog, what works for them, and building that bond as well with the guardian and family member, so everyone feels that their relationship is improving, but everyone's also less stressed, more set up for success, and the bond improves.
Kind of leads us full circle, doesn't it, back to the humans, because it does. But the whole giving dogs choice, giving them agency, and letting them make small decisions, safe decisions, but still letting them make the decision, and to empower them. And even if it's like, which toy do you want to play with, or you're rotating their toys, so you've got some away and then you have some out, and then maybe the next day you put those away and get the ones that are away out, and giving them the opportunity to choose how they engage and when they engage and who they engage with, if that's a dog or a human. It's really important that we also respect their decision as and when they choose to say no, and that we recognize that they're saying no, that's not what's going to happen, that's not what I want to happen.
I don't want to go near that person, please, or that dog, or that thing. No thanks.
Yeah, and that we're always encouraging people to invite the dog into their space and not encroach into the dog's space. So the dog's got the choice to not approach if it doesn't want to. It really grieves me when I see dogs tied up outside school gates while the parent has gone in, or the guardian's gone in to get and then all the kids come out, and you've got a dog tied to a school gate and all the children coming in over the dog's head to say hello. And because it's a Labrador, maybe the guardian doesn't think it'll bite. But if I was strung up by my neck and loads of quick moving beings were sort of coming in across over my head, I'd be tempted to snap as well.
Little nibble.
A little nibble. You're much more polite than me. I'm like, anyway, we digress. Daniel, I'm really keen to talk to you about something. Now, the podcast is powered by Canine Principles, and Canine Principles are sponsoring an event that you've got coming up very, very soon. Can you tell us all about it?
Yeah, so we're very, very excited to have you and the Canine Principles team sponsoring our conference this year, which is coming up next week. So week and 3 days until we start, really, and it's a 2-day event, 2-day dog behaviour conference in Kent, the southeast of England, but we also live stream it, so you can tune in from anywhere in the world, which is the brilliant thing. And we've got some amazing speakers that are going to be there talking about resilience in dogs, which I know is kind of one of the reasons we touched on that as a topic for today. So some incredible people. We've got Suzanne Clothier, we've got Victoria Stilwell, we've got Andrew Hale, we've got Kathy Murphy, who's an incredible neuroscientist. So Bobby Banbury's, who's doing a talk with her as well. I can't name everyone because we've got so many people that take up too much time, but we've just got a fantastic lineup of people, and it's a lovely sort of social event as well, and that's the amazing thing, being able to meet with people like you guys, and people from sort of all over, not just even the UK, but all over the world that work with dogs, and have that opportunity to kind of get a sense of what everyone's individual sort of world and profession looks like. Because I think that's one of the challenges for us in our jobs, is it can be quite isolating sometimes, and it can be quite, we don't often, unless you're running a big franchise, and even if you're running a franchise still, you're still often kind of working on a one-to-one basis or a group class basis with clients, not necessarily with other colleagues. So it's nice to have that opportunity, I think, as well, to actually spend some time with other people that are facing the same things you are on a day-to-day basis.
I don't know about you, but when I talk to like friends and family members, I'm like, can't we talk about dogs? Like, I don't know if we have normal conversations about stuff, but to spend like a few days immersed just in dog geek mode with other people who don't mind me being a dog geek. Like, my friends don't mind, they're used to it by now, but just to be able to have conversations about the nervous system and different cortisol levels and just like stuff that we've touched on this evening, to be able to spend a whole 2 days. You okay? Sorry. No, she's okay. Just to spend a whole 2 days completely immersed in Dog Geekland, learning from some of the best. Oh my goodness, so many good names on the lineup. So if people want to grab tickets, are there still tickets available?
Yeah, we've still got, so ticket sales close next Thursday, so a week and a day, basically 7 days until they close. So they are still available. You can join in person, you can join online. If you're going in person, there's a couple of extra seminars in the hotel as well, the day before and the day after the conference. So if you want to kind of immerse yourself even more in person, and there's that opportunity as well. There's a seminar on resilience the day before, and a seminar on shelter behaviour with Tom Candy and Trish McMillan, who are both kind of just amazing people in the shelter industry. Trish is based in the US. She's just sort of worked in shelters and done amazing things in shelters, working with some really, really difficult cases. And then Tom has spent many years working for the Dogs Trust, so in the UK. So a breadth of experience between them both, and just super excited to see kind of what they're going to be talking about together. It's going to be so useful for anyone working in that field, in the rescue field, in the shelter field, for sure. So
I'm there for it, but I just hope I've got some brain left after the Saturday and Sunday.
Oh my goodness, this is amazing. And it's so great that you can also just get it online for people who live far away.
Yeah,
it's so good, because I'm so jealous. I would totally be there. But that's amazing for the online, because that can be so valuable to everyone around the world. And it's so good that they have that opportunity to get that access.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a little cocktail party going on the Saturday night, isn't there, Daniel?
There is. And I have spent a lot of time picking out the cocktails, so it was my favourite thing to do. I won't spend time actually doing any of the planning or the boring bit.
Fantastic. Oh, well, really looking forward to it. So where can people grab tickets?
So if you go to our website, Animal Behaviour Can, if you Google it, ABK Conference or ABK 2025, it should all be there.
What I'm going to do is just pop the link in the comments. So anyone who is watching, I'm just going to do it right now. And you need to act quick, people, because the deadline is coming and it is round the corner. So please do come and say hello. I'm going to be there on the Canine Principles and the International Institute for Canine Ethics stands with the wonderful Jay Gurdon, who's a former podcast guest, renowned canine author.
I think it was the signal. Are you back? Oh, there we go. Sorry, it just froze.
Come and say hello at the ABK conference. The link is in the comments right now. So please do come and say hi, get your tickets. And if you can come to the cocktail party on the Saturday night, I look forward to raising a toast with you.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I forgot, we've got a red carpet as well. They've told me that they're putting out a red carpet for the cocktail party, so that's exciting. Have no idea what it will look like.
Am I going to have to wear shoes that aren't wellies?
No, I know what I'm thinking. There's no dress code though, so it's dog training. It's not, don't panic.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't own something with no hair on when you've got dogs.
Well, the red carpet would probably be covered in dog hair anyway.
Brown carpet.
Yeah. Who wants a red one? We'll go brown. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Daniel. Really, this morning for Emily. It's been an absolute joy to have you on, and if people haven't already checked out the conference, I'm sure they will now and head over before ticket sales close, and hopefully we will see you there to learn from some of the best names in the industry. Next on the Dog Expert podcast, we have got a fantastic lady coming on to talk to us about all things separation anxiety. So keep an eye out. It's great to have you back, Em, because Em's been off for a few weeks, but we've got her back. And I know separation anxiety is one of your favourite topics. And I'll look forward to seeing you all next time. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.
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 Thank you for listening to the Dog Expert podcast, the podcast dogs would want you to listen to. If you've enjoyed this episode, do come and let us know in our free Facebook group for dog lovers everywhere, Ethical Dog Training with Canine Principles. That way we can make more content like this that you'll love. We would love for you to leave a review on here and hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode.